My friends, it's been over a year since Sudan was engulfed in a terrible civil war. But you know what? If many covered the broad geopolitical aspects of this conflict, nobody ever talked about the gritty fighting and combat actions taking place there. So in this special video, we'll take a look at the weapons, military equipment, and tactics used by both sides. While some battles take place in an urban environment, similar to battles taking place across the Middle East, others have Mad Max vibes, with heavy fighting for strategic desert towns like El Abyad. Here's a map of the current situation of the war. Light red is the area controlled by government forces of President Al-Burhan, aka the Sudanese Armed Forces. The area in green is controlled by Hemedti's rebels called the Rapid Support Forces, or RSF. Lastly, in that region, you also have local ethnic militias. In brown, the Darfur Liberation Front, and in yellow, the Sudan's People's Liberation Movement. Meanwhile, heavy fighting is taking place in and around the capital region of Khartoum-Omdurman. Did you know that on the 8th of May 2024, the Sudanese army witnessed its bloodiest day in history as they suffered a reported 1,000 soldiers KIA?
We are winning!
Not a single headline about this in the mainstream media. And the worst is that these Sudanese troops attacked aboard infantry fighting vehicles and tanks.
Disorder! Our men flee the battlefield!
More on that later. Throughout all the footage I'll show you in this video, you will easily recognize RSF fighters. They will wear tan-colored khaki uniforms, actually a bit like this one, and because for the most part they're desert fighters, they wrap up Tuareg-like headscarves around their head. Actually, hold on a second. This is approximately what an RSF fighter would look like. Their art of war revolves around hit-and-run attacks aboard various pickup trucks and technicals, and if necessary they pimp their rides. Like on this one where you can see them firing a heavy machine gun, and you can even see a bag full of RPG rockets hanging on the side. You can also easily recognize RSF fighters by the videos you see online. If the song that is played is a banger, it's the RSF. Can someone explain me why it's always the bad guys that drop the bangers? And to complete the presentation, their slogan is Al-Jahiziyya Al-Sur'a, readiness and speed. On the surface, the current war appears to be merely a power struggle between two generals. General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan, the president of Sudan and the chief of the armed forces, and his former BFF, the commander of the Rapid Support Forces, Lieutenant General Mohamed Hamdan Dagalo, better known as Hemedti. In reality, Sudan is facing an ethno-nationalist rebellion that takes its roots in Darfur, a desertic province southwest of the country, now home to 11 million people. That's more than Sweden. Sudan might have only won one silver medal at the Olympics, but they're certainly world champions in the countries in constant chaos category. Since its independence from Britain and Egypt in 1956, Sudan has experienced 4 civil wars, countless cases of ethnic cleansing, 19 attempted coups of which 7 were successful. The odds are not bad. You start a coup and you have 1 in 2 chances of getting the throne. To understand how this entire mess even started, we have to go back to the roots. If you want to skip the setup and foreplay, you can also jump right into the action at this exact timestamp. Al-Burhan was born in 1961 in a village north of Khartoum. This means he belongs to the Sudanese Arab ethnic majority of the country, which constitutes 70% of the 49 million inhabitants. At 30 years old, he joined the elite border guards force, and from there he rose through the ranks. Meanwhile, Hemedti was born in Darfur around 1974, into the Maharia clan of the Rezigat tribe. Overall, he belongs to the larger nomadic Baggara Arab ethnic group that is spread out across the Sahel all the way to Niger. However, due to desertification of their ancestral lands, these groups of Arab pastoralists began migrating towards the more fertile lands of the Four and Masalit communities. And this completely disbalanced the demographics of the region. All of a sudden, the Baggara Arabs now made up 40% of Darfur's population. The authorities in Khartoum said diversity is our strength. Surprise, surprise, 2003, a war erupts in Darfur between those communities. As the region turned into a black hole, these events were a clear reflection of the inability of the al-Bashir government to bring back peace, and of the weakness of the Sudanese Armed Forces against the enemy's mobile warfare tactics. That's how the government called for special help. The al-Bashir government recruited those militias of Arab pastoralists to fight Nilo-Saharan rebels in Darfur now seeking independence. As an officer of the elite border guards, Al-Burhan led a brutal repression against these indigenous Nilo-Saharan tribes in Darfur. Meanwhile, Hemedti had joined the Janjaweed, which literally means devils on horseback. Although some Janjaweed were paid by Khartoum, many, just like their ancestors have done for centuries, simply joined with the promise of plunder: cows, camels, sheep, and even women. I don't remember the exact exchange rate, but at the time it was 1 camel was worth 2 AKs. The possibility of growing rich from these raids even attracted thousands of fighters from Arab pastoralist tribes from Chad. In the end, human rights groups have accused the Janjaweed and the border guards of countless war crimes promoting Arab supremacy over Nilo-Saharan people. The war in Darfur resulted in an estimated 300,000 fatalities and millions of people displaced from their homes. Yeah, buddy, welcome to the club. My dad was also a war criminal. Khartoum soon lost control over the paramilitaries it had recruited, and this entire chaos propelled Hemedti at the top of the Janjaweed. In August 2007, Hemedti led a first uprising against the government, claiming he was fighting for the justice of Arabs. For months he stayed in his desert holdout. However, without financial support, his 4,000 men began trickling back to their homes. And by early 2008, Hemedti was back in the government fold. 5 years later, in 2013, now Lieutenant General Hemedti reformed the Janjaweed into the RSF, or Rapid Support Forces. He also learned his lesson as he started growing his business interests in the region, mainly in the mining sector. But an event would make him even richer. The 2015 Saudi Emirati intervention in Yemen was not going well, and there were a serious shortage of infantry. That's how Hemedti came to the rescue and recruited tens of thousands of fighters from his homeland of Darfur to fight as mercenaries. 4 years later, in 2019, he deployed another 1,000 RSF fighters to help General Haftar's army in Libya. Within a decade, Hemedti grew wealthy, powerful, and ambitious. In April 2019, General Al-Burhan and Hemedti ousted President Omar al-Bashir. Al-Burhan served as chairman of the Transitional Military Council. However, in October 2021, Al-Burhan orchestrated another coup d'etat, which this time dissolved the civilian government. Since then, Al-Burhan has been the de facto ruler of Sudan. Meanwhile, his friend Hemedti held the position of first vice president of Sudan. Because of this entire turmoil across the country, the situation in Darfur once again worsened. As you can see on this map, between 2019 and 2021, violence between communities restarted all across this region, and in response the RSF simply rampaged through more villages. Beginning of the Civil War. 2 years later, in 2023, fighting broke out in the capital Khartoum between government forces and Hemedti's militias. The RSF captured the Khartoum International Airport, as well as numerous objectives in the city, including the presidential palace. RSF fighters stormed President Al-Burhan's residence in an attempt to eliminate him, but Al-Burhan and his bodyguards fought back, with one of his bodyguards later say that Al-Burhan himself picked up an AK-47 and shot right at the RSF. Pretty badass, pretty badass. That's how Al-Burhan managed to escape, but over 30 of his bodyguards were KIA in these clashes. Meanwhile, in the rest of Sudan, the RSF tried to take control of several key cities like Merove, Gedaref, Kassala, Niala, Port Sudan, Gadougli, Damazin, and Kosti. Although initially successful, the Sudanese army quickly managed to regain these cities one day later. Overall, we witnessed a rapid collapse of RSF presence on the eastern side of the White Nile after the second day of the fighting. Hemedti's coup had failed. Very intense fighting would take place over the following months, mostly in Khartoum and Omdurman, only interrupted by temporary truces. RSF offensive. On June 11th, Sudanese Armed Forces received reinforcements and launched a counteroffensive in Khartoum. Like this column of infantrymen located near the town of Ad-Damer, their objective was to unblock several key positions: the Signal Corps, the Police HQ, the General Intelligence Service Base, and the Armored Corps Base. Inside all these positions, the Sudanese Armed Forces had a number of technicals and armored vehicles that broke enemy attacks. Further south, another unit of Sudanese soldiers were spotted at the Al-Wasatiyah junction between the Armored Corps Base and the bridge over the White Nile. On the 25th of June, after 5 days of heavy fighting, RSF forces captured the police headquarters in Khartoum, where they took possession of dozens of Sharif II armored vehicles, ammunition, and more than 100 pickup trucks. The loss of this symbolic base marked a turning point in public support for President al-Burhan. People started making memes about his military failures. On this map from the 6th of July 2023, you can see the approximate areas of control in the city of Omdurman. Yet the next day, on the 7th of July, RSF soldiers were seen walking inside the General Intelligence Service compound right next to the international airport. One by one, key government positions were falling to the RSF. The main tactical unit of the Rapid Support Forces is relatively small. For example, the so-called 20th Al-Da'ain Division numbered 15 officers and 527 rank and file. Essentially a battalion-sized unit composed of roughly 550 soldiers aboard 100 vehicles. As you can see, the RSF suffers from a lack of armored vehicles, as well as a lack of air defense capabilities. But at the same time, their main strength is mobility, which explains their tactics of constant back and forth during battles. Whenever they capture an enemy position, they often withdraw quickly after in fear of airstrikes and artillery shelling. In turn, this allows the Sudanese army to reoccupy parts of the lost positions and then rinse and repeat. Overall, the mobility and tactical skills of the Rapid Support Forces allowed them to control vast areas of the country, and many times they managed to encircle entire Sudanese army garrisons, but they break their teeth against fortified strongholds due to the lack of heavy equipment. Like we've seen, the Sudanese Armed Forces benefit from strong defensive positions, and with their armored vehicles they can launch deadly counterattacks, plus the constant support of their air force in forms of airstrikes or the airdropping of supplies for encircled garrisons. On the 15th of July, al-Burhan said enough! The Sudanese Armed Forces aimed at breaking the siege of the Signal Corps base once and for all. A first attack was launched across the Al-Hafiyah bridge, but it seems to have been a diversion, as the main column rushed towards the police headquarters, and that's when they were ambushed. From the videos I saw, and they were not pleasant to watch, RSF fighters took out at least 20 vehicles, and most of the passengers. Turns out in this battle, the RSF actually captured the commander of this task force, as well as over 90 enemy vehicles that were abandoned in that sector. In this video, you can see RSF soldiers celebrating their victory, yes, with their banger soundtracks, as they nicknamed this battle Al-Burhan's Blunder.
Fuck.
So that was the disastrous situation in Khartoum. However, the RSF were in severe jeopardy as they only controlled one logistics road between Khartoum and their home turf of Darfur. The city of Al Junaina was key as it secured supply lines with friendly Arab tribes in Chad. As you can imagine, this area was of vital importance for Hemedti. It was also through Chad that Rapid Support Forces received most of their supplies and reinforcements. You see, now it was the UAE's turn to help Hemedti, as the Emiratis were leading major recruitment operations in N'Djamena, the capital of Chad. All these recruits would be sent as mercenaries to fight for the RSF. These guys were paid an average of $400 a month in a country where the average salary is around $250. Obviously, the main recruitment pool was Arab tribesmen due to their cross-border ties with the Rapid Support Forces. It's also important to note that many Chadian fighters left the country after the Civil War and were in fact among the first elements of the RSF in 2013. And let me tell you, Chadian soldiers are among the best, if not the best, in all of Africa. Think of when Gaddafi's tanks got clapped against Chadian Toyotas in the 1980s. The Sudanese government was truly unhappy to learn that over 400 flights were carried from Chad towards RSF bases. If half those flights transported military personnel with an average of 130 mercenaries per flight, we could be looking at an extra 25,000 mercenaries from across the Sahel for the RSF. There was also the city of Niala for its connections with the Central African Republic, and once again, friendly Arab tribes living there. Due to the importance of these rear operating bases, many battles occurred in North, West, and South Darfur between April and October 2023. It's important to note that just like they did in the past, Rapid Support Forces often resorted to scorched earth tactics and countless exactions against civilians in order to pacify Darfur. Like on the 3rd of August, when they razed the town of Sirba, torching 4,500 homes.
Are we the baddies?
Now back to the capital region. By mid-August, there was heavy fighting over the 4 strategic bridges linking Khartoum and Omdurman. The RSF tried to establish a bridgehead over the Al-Halafiya bridge but failed to maintain their positions. However, they had more luck across the Shambat bridge, where they overran an SAF unit and finally managed to establish a solid bridgehead in Omdurman. Just for you to understand, if the RSF managed to capture Khartoum and Omdurman, it was literally GG well played for Al-Burhan. By the 28th of August, RSF assault detachments penetrated the outer perimeter of the Armored Corps base. In this video, you can see how they breached the northeastern wall. The attackers climbed over one of the walls, opened all the gates, and then rushed inside the base. On their way forward, they had to evade the ever-present snipers hidden on rooftops. Shortly after, a Sudanese Army T-72 showed up, and all RSF fighters began to scatter. Despite this tactical victory, the writing was on the wall. By the 4th of September, the Sudanese Armed Forces had lost control over the eastern side of the base. They only controlled a small area linking the Armored Corps base to the ammunition base. But all this was anyway fully surrounded. It was just a matter of time. Here you can see all the armored vehicles the RSF managed to capture after the battle. GG well played, it's time to pull out. Meanwhile, the encirclement was tightening around the Khartoum army headquarters. The situation got even more critical when these French-speaking Chadians showed up aboard the tanks they had captured from the armored base. And that's how, boom, boom, they destroyed one building after another. Literally at point blank. This was the frontline situation around the Khartoum-Omdurman region as of the 18th of September. Most of Khartoum was effectively under RSF control, apart from the encircled Sudanese army garrisons of the Signal Corps, the General Command Center, plus the armored and ammunition corps further south. The Rapid Support Forces also expanded their area of control along the Blue Nile, all the way up to North Khartoum, where they encircled the Weapons Corps garrison. And I'm not even done on the west side of the White Nile. Other RSF detachments like this one made significant progress inside the residential sectors of Omdurman. And you can already guess what happened next. Another encirclement. I swear Russian commanders are looking at what's going on there and they're jealous. That's how RSF units surrounded the base of the Engineers Corps. Only the northern half of Omdurman was still controlled by Al-Burhan and the Sudanese Armed Forces. Although heavy fighting was taking place in and around the capital region, every step forward was painful and very costly in manpower, because it more or less cancelled the mobility advantage of the RSF. That's how the Rapid Support Forces also turned their attention to the North Kordofan province. Reason number one, it would consolidate their supply lines with Khartoum. But reason number two, it would also give them access to the many oil fields of the region. The 16th Sudanese Army Division positioned in Nyala was a thorn in the foot of Hemedti's goals. Hemedti needed one of his most trustworthy and capable commanders to finish this battle once and for all. In September, Abdelrahim Dagalo, the brother of Hemedti, was put in command of the siege of Nyala. Abdelrahim Dagalo intervened with his reinforcements after a 5-month-long siege that greatly diminished the strength of the 2,000-strong Sudanese army garrison. The RSF doubled down attacks on the city, and by the 23rd of October, they had overrun several enemy defensive positions. In this video recorded after the capture of the fuel depot, we can notice dozens of technicals and roughly 200 fighters equipped with the AKs, but no body armor or helmets whatsoever. The RSF finalized the conquest by the 26th of October. We can believe the 16th Division of the Sudanese Army was all but annihilated. The RSF captured lots of armored vehicles like this BRDM-2 armored vehicle, and an estimated 60 SAF soldiers changed sides. After this victory, 2 weeks later, Abdelrahim Dagalo turned his attention to Al-Junaina, garrisoned by the 15th Infantry Division. However, this time the RSF could not wait another 5-6 months before capturing the position. Officially on the 2nd of November, Dagalo gave the garrison a 6-hour ultimatum to surrender. We can be sure that the RSF bribed local SAF commanders, because 2 days later, the 15th Infantry Division abandoned its combat positions in Al-Junaina as a column of 60 vehicles fled towards Chad. We can estimate 400 soldiers apprehended by Chadian authorities with all their equipment seized, and which most likely will be handed over to RSF. Meanwhile, Rapid Support Forces assault detachments stormed the city, and that's how 700 Sudanese army soldiers were captured. By the end of November 2023, Al-Fasher was the last of the 5 state capitals in Darfur under Sudanese army control.
We are winning!
If things could not go worse, the Rapid Support Forces also dislodged the 22nd Division from Baba Nusa. In turn, the local Sudanese army commanders withdrew its troops from 6 bases. Even the government police also carried out an early pullout of its representatives from West Kordofan. And this campaign allowed Hemedti's men to capture very strategic oil fields, even if most oil reserves are located in South Sudan. As you can see on this map, there are significant oil fields in Darfur and Kordofan provinces. One pipeline goes north along the White Nile towards Khartoum, and then ready for exportation towards Port Sudan, while another one goes from the Kordofan province north towards the city of Al-Abyad, where there is a major refinery, to Khartoum and again Port Sudan. Where is all this oil going? Well, all I can say is that all this infrastructure was built by China, and they certainly want a return on their investments. The latest RSF push led to a direct confrontation with Nilo-Saharan tribesmen. In response, the RSF torched a number of their villages in South Kordofan. At the same time, on the 5th of November, another disaster for the Sudanese army in Khartoum. I don't understand how an army that was rated so highly in Africa is taking so many L's. That's when RSF assault detachments stormed the remainder of the Armored Corps base. And you know what? The Sudanese army coped hard by saying that at least they have inflicted heavy casualties on the enemy.
Right.
On the 11th of November, a massive explosion destroyed the Shambat bridge. All we know is that this brings a clear advantage to the Sudanese Armed Forces, as the RSF will have trouble bringing troops from one side of the river to another. Since RSF attack vectors towards Omdurman were halted, mobile comms were rerouted to the south to secure another crossing point over the White Nile. As you can see with these images, the RSF managed to storm the Jebel Awila neighborhood 40 kilometers south of Khartoum. The Sudanese Armed Forces managed to regroup around the dam, but were soon forced to abandon their positions under the pressure of the assaults of the RSF. During the retreat, Sudanese soldiers blew up a 20-meter-long drawbridge across the dam, but they could not afford to fully destroy the dam because it would cause a catastrophic flooding of Khartoum. I mean, our Eastern European friends would have certainly done it, but maybe not the Africans. By the end of December 2023, the RSF was facing some sort of stalemate in Khartoum, and Hemedti had to think of a way to break the deadlock. That's how he ordered his men to charge up the Blue Nile towards the town of Wad Madani, thus opening the battle for the Al Jazeera province. Meanwhile, an RSF recon mission of 17 vehicles entered the northern part of the Al-Qadarif province to scout the area and gather intel from the local population. Now, the reason why I'm telling you about this is because this unit was commanded by someone called Abu Aklah Kikel, a former prominent Islamist commander that defected from the Sudanese Armed Forces. At this rate, with all their offensives, the rapid support forces were cutting off the government from the southern half of the country. If we take a look at this situation in February 2024, we can only witness the massive gains the RSF have achieved since the start of the Civil War. However, there were still a couple thorns to be cleared out, namely the SAF garrisons of Al-Fashar, Al-Fulah, and Nahud, and Al-Abyad. Meanwhile, the continuous exactions by the RSF led the SLM and GAM ethnic militias in Darfur to ally with the Sudanese Armed Forces. Essentially, for the rapid support forces, anyone that was not Arab, out. Oh yeah, I think it's time to break the momentum of the video with a historical fun fact. The Sudanese 5th Infantry Division garrisoned in Al-Abyad is nicknamed the Camel Army, in reference to its predecessor, the Camel Corps of the Gordon Relief Expedition of 1884-1885. And now the geopolitical fun fact is that whoever controls El-Abyad controls its oil refinery, but also significant gold mines. And we all know how much Hemedti loves cash.
I love gold!
Surprise, surprise, many of these gold mines are exploited by the former Wagner PMC. Some sources even mention that this Sudanese gold has significantly helped the Russian economy under embargo. As you can see on this map, the region west of El-Abyad is filled with gold mines. There are also gold mining sites along the White and Blue Niles, but the main gold mineral deposits are located in the northeastern part of Sudan, which is currently still under control of Al-Burhan. The Sudanese army strikes back. With the catastrophic situation unfolding across Sudan, Al-Burhan and the Sudanese Armed Forces had to respond quickly. In early February, the Sudanese Armed Forces launched an operation to break the besieged forces south of Omdurman. On the 4th of February, Group North pushed from the industrial area and Group South from the Engineers Corps. Both groups would converge towards the Khalifa Square. 2 weeks later, it was mission accomplished. The Sudanese Armed Forces achieved their first major victory as they broke through a 10-month-long siege. Here you can see jubilant troops of the Engineer Corps base during their link-up with the soldiers of Group North. 1 month later, the Sudanese army recaptured the national TV and radio station. Due to the collapse of their positions in Omdurman, the RSF decided to liquidate the Signal Corps garrison once and for all. A first RSF unit was geolocated here and another right here, 700 meters north of the base. But the RSF mercenaries were not down to be used as cannon fodder and charge ahead in frontal attacks. And that's how the Signal Corps base did not fall. In the south, SAF forces counterattacked as well and took back some cities like Baba Nusa and Dilling in the oil-rich West Kordofan province, securing the oil pipeline that transits from El-Abyad to Khartoum. It's clear the Sudanese army benefited from the fact that the RSF was overly stretched out across the country. In March, fighting erupted in the Al Jazeera province. The Sudanese 4th Division launched a recon force in the sector of Al-Faw. The goal of the local RSF commander was to divert as many Sudanese army units away from Khartoum. Although outnumbered, the rapid support forces managed to launch a strike along the Blue Nile, as some of their forces were spotted 13 kilometers from the city of Sennar. However, the Maskirovka can only last so long. By the 8th of April, the Sudanese Armed Forces and ethnic militias converged on Wad Madani, both from the west and the east from Al-Faw. A splendid victory was awaiting them, and that's when they got clapped. Again, I don't understand.
Madness and stupidity.
The rearguard of one of these Sudanese army columns was ambushed on the road leading to Wad Madani, near the village of Al-Afia. In this video, you can see RSF soldiers loot multiple abandoned SAF supply trucks after the battle. Nonetheless, by early April, the Sudanese Armed Forces managed to greatly expand their area of control on the west side of the White Nile, all the while maintaining most of their garrisons on the east bank. After a year of fighting, none of the belligerents could get the upper hand. It was like the Russo-Ukraine War, but the African Mad Max version. On the 12th of April, the JSAMF, ethnic militias from Darfur, renounced neutrality and declared war on the Rapid Support Forces, thus opening a new front for the already stretched out RSF contingents. At the end of April, the Rapid Support Forces attempted to storm the besieged Sudanese army garrison in El Abyad, but the attack was repulsed. Like in other parts of the front, Sudanese army garrisons benefited from strong defensive positions, which were solidified by the presence of armored vehicles, artillery, and airstrikes. Now on the southern front, the goal of the Sudanese army was to break the siege of El Abyad, and to do this they had to retake control of the road linking Kosti to El Abyad. On the 8th of May, Sudanese army units of El Abyad emerged victorious after a successful sortie. South of the city, they recaptured the Central Police Reserve Station, and in the east, they pushed 10 kilometers towards the city of Kordofan. Once again, a great victory was awaiting them. They even brought many trucks full of ammunition and various supplies to permanently occupy the new positions. However, the RSF counterattacked the forward elements of the scattered 5th Infantry Division. It was a pure debacle. All the supplies were abandoned, and hordes of fleeing Sudanese army soldiers gunned down by the enemy.
Disorder! Our men flee the battlefield!
Even worse, the column that left Kosti did not fare much better, as it got completely annihilated. It's always the same thing. Armored columns of the Sudanese army stuck on roads and they get flanked from all directions. Altogether, the 8th of May was a bloody day for the Sudanese Armed Forces. At least 200 soldiers were reported KIA according to video evidence alone, but the most conservative estimates point towards 500 soldiers KIA, whereas some claim as high as 1,000 fatalities. And that's when the RSF launched their own counteroffensive along the White Nile to capture the now weakened garrison of Kosti. Although the Sudanese army recaptured Baba Nusa, now its 22nd Division is now encircled. Again! At least they can shell the surrounding RSF units and call multiple airstrikes on enemy positions. The control of the sky by the Sudanese Armed Forces is key, since the 22nd Division only survives thanks to the airdrop of supplies. At the same time, it was reported that a number of care packages missed their target and fall right into enemy lines. Currently, heavy fighting is taking place around Al-Fasher, as RSF units are storming the northeastern side of the town held by the 6th Infantry Division. As you can see in this video that is much longer than I intended to, the Sudanese Armed Forces are close of being evicted from the southwest of the country. If the Rapid Support Forces manage to secure this entire area, they will get their hands on countless oil fields and gold mines that can help them pay for more mercenaries, and overall this will allow them to concentrate as many troops as possible for the final capture of the capital region of Khartoum-Omdurman. That's all I have for you today. Let me know in the comment section what you thought of my analysis. If you're new to this channel, make sure to like and subscribe. And if you want to support the channel, make sure to check out my Patreon or PayPal. The link is in the description below.